episode of the Good Morning Minute podcast. We're here to start the day with purpose, passion, and a little bit of power. I'm your host, Angelina Mojica, and today's conversation is part of our special series in partnership with the Empower Her Steps virtual conference, a movement rooted in helping women rise, heal, and walk boldly into the life God has designed for them. Our mission is simple but powerful, empowering life purpose. Because we believe that when a woman finds clarity in her calling, everything changes for her family, her community, and generations to come. So friends, grab your coffee, take a deep breath, and get ready to be uplifted as we dive into real stories, honest lessons, and bold steps towards purpose with our incredible guest, Janine. Hi, Janine. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to see you.
Wonderful. Well, Janine, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm from the UK originally. I'm currently based in Thailand. Been out in Asia about 3 years, and I run a business called Change for Success, which I've been running since 2014. So I help a lot of executives, managers, leaders, business owners overcome overwhelm, burnout, get them to a place of clarity, confidence, success. And I do a lot of work on a one-on-one and with organizations as well. So yeah, I've been been running the business, as I say, for quite a few years now. Background in psychology, and I absolutely love this. I used to do some quite different stuff, which I'm sure we'll get into, but it's there's some similarities as well, interestingly enough.
Wonderful. Well, I'm excited to get to know you a little bit better and the things that you do. But before we start our conversation, I'd like to just ask a fun little question to get us started. What's your go-to morning drink?
My go-to morning
Drink?
drink.
Yes.
I like a good English cup of tea to get me
Tea.
started for the day. Yeah. And it's hard to
Wonderful.
find in Bangkok. We can find it, but it's more difficult to come by than it is back in the UK. But I'm a real tea person, a real Brit for that.
Well, fun. All right. I'm a coffee drinker myself, but hey, it gets me going. So good to know. So let's jump into our conversation. What was the defining moment of challenge or pain in your life, and how did it impact you?
So before I ran my business, I used to work with men in prison across the UK. And I did that for many years, for 13 years. And I worked with all the offenders that I worked with, they were all high risk.
Mm,
So murderers, rapists, drug
wow.
dealers, violent offenders. And I had huge caseloads. And it was super stressful, as you can imagine.
Mhm.
And I was going through a lot. There was a lot going on all at once. Dealing with that job, trying to firefight on a day-to-day basis. And even though I was working with very challenging cases with severe mental health, personality
Mm,
disorder, suicidation, that kind of thing, we weren't really trained. We were only trained with the very basics in mental health. And I didn't understand how to look after my own mental health, interestingly enough. And there was so much going on then. I was not only juggling this very stressful job. My dad died at a young age. He died at 60. And I met this guy around the same time. And it was kind of what I wanted at the time because I was so stressed out, I was so burnt out, and
mhm.
losing my dad, I was kind of pulling everyone together in the family. And he actually became very manipulative and abusive
Wow.
within that relationship. I couldn't recognize a lot of it at the time because I was so stressed out, I was so burnt out. There was a lot going on. But he
Mhm.
came at a time when I was, at my lowest ebb, I guess, when all that going on all at once. And the relationship very quickly became very emotionally and psychologically abusive.
Wow.
And it continued. And the defining moment for me, it did take some time, but we did end up getting married.
Mhm.
And I was always told, when we get married, when we have kids, things will change. And that was my hope. I hope things would change. And I still didn't quite recognize what was actually going on.
Mhm.
And I've talked about this openly I did do across the UK, and I've talked online about surviving in a domestic abuse relationship because if I was working with all these types of offenders, including offenders who committed serious offences of domestic abuse, and I
Mhm.
was teaching them all different types of abuse, yet I couldn't say I was in an abusive marriage because we did end up getting married.
Mhm.
Um, the reason why I started talking openly about it was to raise that awareness, But
Yeah.
I did start to understand at some point. I think when you're so deeply in it, it's hard to see anything.
Mhm.
And especially when that person is gaslighting you and they're blaming everything except themselves. This is happening, that's happening, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're making me do this. It was just constant. It was just constant chaos for a number of years.
Yeah.
And I finally, after several attempts, managed to escape and leave that marriage. It was very hard to leave, but when I left, I hadn't actually left because I'd gone to my mum's about half an hour up the road. He was phoning, he was texting, he was turning up at the doorstep. Like I just couldn't escape him. And I was getting to the point where, I mean, I looked a lot older than I do now. I was getting to the point where I was just at my wit's end. I was so fragile emotionally, physically, mentally. I was using really bad coping strategies. I was already doing that anyway in the job at the time, but I didn't recognize that or understand it because I didn't know at that time fully how the mind works and how we end up being in these situations. I just didn't have that awareness.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, the defining moment, going back to your question, I was teetering on the edge of going back to him because he was constantly just
Yeah.
continually, and something happened, and he actually threatened to take my dog because I'd managed to take the dog with me, and all this was happening, and it was just I was literally at my wit's end. And somebody had told me a couple of weeks earlier about this therapist. I was living in Liverpool at the time in the UK. She was like, "He's
Mhm.
the best. He's the best in Liverpool. He's really amazing." Because I'd only told a couple of close people what was going on because
Mhm.
there was a lot of shame and guilt that goes on. So
Mhm.
yeah, so I booked in to see him. I was going to cancel it because I was going to go back to my ex-husband, and
Mhm.
and then this thing happened, and I couldn't face my job anymore. I couldn't face anything. So I went along to this therapist. Didn't really want to go because I was like, I can sort my own stuff out. I'm a strong, independent woman.
Mhm.
And I cried all the way there. I was sat with him for 2 hours. It was a Friday night. And we had this whole conversation. I've done a whole talk on it called How One Word Changed My Life. But this
Mhm.
conversation that we had, this very defining moment, changed the trajectory of my life. And if I hadn't have met him and had that conversation, I probably would have gone back to my ex-husband.
Wow.
But I remember driving out my building that day of work because I was dealing with so much stress in work, thinking I can't face this life for one more day. I
Mhm.
couldn't physically do it. So we had this conversation, and as I said before, I'm living in Bangkok now. I just needed to get as far away as possible, and that gave me the strength to go to the doctors, which I did on the Monday after, which I wouldn't have done. I went to the doctor, he signed me off work, and I booked a flight that day. I flew out from the UK to Thailand, and I travelled around Vietnam on my own for a month because I just needed to get away. And it was the biggest, it was such a defining moment. And it's a really good question because that changed my life. That month, it allowed me to meet fantastic people, walk into my life again, experience the culture, the place, everything. It just gave me that freedom for the first time
Mhm.
in just over 4 years. We were together in 4 years in total, and to some that might not seem that long, but when you're dealing with chaos every single day,
Yeah.
and then you're dealing with caseloads of 70 or 80 men at once, and you're seeing these guys week in, week out, week in, week out. Even talking about it just makes me feel exhausted because it was just constant
Yeah.
exhaustion, constant chaos.
Mhm. Wow. Well, Janine, I just want to say thank you for sharing and being so vulnerable. Wow. Just I can just imagine. I mean, like you're telling me this is what it was like. I'm a social worker too by trade, and so I understand caseloads. I work in the child
Mm.
welfare department, so I work with the children and their families that are, going through things. So I can just imagine the other side of that where you're working with the prison inmates and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. And we
Wow.
used to liaise with social workers a lot, and everyone was burnt out in those roles, as you know. There
Mhm.
was so
Mhm.
many people off on long-term sick, there was people off with
Mhm.
work-related stress, huge caseloads, but as you probably experienced yourself, there was no real support. And then people
Yeah.
just went off, sick. So I saw firsthand for 13 years. This is why I teach organizations now the exact opposite. I saw firsthand how you don't look after staff, how you don't look after your biggest asset. As I say, even though I was working with very, very severe cases of personality disorder, schizophrenia, I mean, I could sit here for hours just talking about one case, obviously
Yeah.
bearing in mind confidentiality, because it was just that what we used to see, but there was no real in-depth training. So you just expected to get
Mhm.
on with it. And from management above, there was no support, there was no real training for them. They were just
Mhm.
promoted to management, and I'm sure you saw really, really similar, you had really similar experiences yourself, right?
Mhm.
It's sad, but it's how these organizations sadly run very poorly, in my opinion, not looking after the biggest asset.
Absolutely. I know. Yeah. Been there and done that very much.
Mm.
Wow. Okay. So I so now you're off to Thailand, and I feel like this is kind of your healing moment, right? Your growing moment. So let's talk about that trip to Thailand. What were some of the things that helped you heal and grow through this season?
Yeah, yeah, again, great question because I went through this chaos continually every single day,
Hmm.
emotional turmoil, psychological abuse, not sleeping, ridiculously long hours with high caseloads, just a combination of that was it's just no way to live. It's existing, when you're at the hands of
Hmm.
somebody who is so manipulative and they're so controlling, and you when they tell you that so many times, you've done this, you've done that, it's all your, calling you all the names under the sun. You hear it that often, you begin to believe it, and I actually found out when I started doing this work with the therapist that I was telling you about.
Hmm.
It was aligned with my underlying beliefs, which I didn't even have a clue what beliefs were back then. I thought a belief was a religious belief. So I started to learn that. But yeah, like when I flew out to Thailand, I stayed here. I'm in Bangkok now. I stayed in Bangkok. I'd only been to Bangkok a couple of times. I said to myself, I need to go somewhere as far. I just needed to escape as far away as
Hmm.
possible. And I thought, I've been to Bangkok a couple of times. It's a cool place. So I landed here. I booked a really nice five-star hotel for 2 nights. And I remember the second night, actually, I was just this beautiful room. There was a huge bath in the middle of the room, and I was just lying there in the bath and just having a beer, and I could hear somebody playing some music downstairs, and I just thought, wow, for the first time I felt free. And then it was before mobile phones. I had a mobile phone, but you couldn't access the internet, because it was back
Hmm.
in 2011. And
Hmm.
before I boarded the plane, I messaged a few people to say that I was going. So I went away for just under a month, and I've not had any contact with my husband at the time for a week,
Hmm.
which was really, really unusual for me. There was some kind of contact. So literally, I was about to board the plane. I had to tell him I was married to him. I messaged him and I said, just to let you know, I'm going away for a few days. I'll be in contact when I get back. I took the SIM card out my phone and I hid the SIM card because I knew I just wouldn't have had that freedom. And this
Hmm.
is why I love, I'm sure you'll agree, I love the fact that when I was younger, we didn't have mobile phones. You could just
Hmm.
go and
Yeah.
experience life. And so the next day I booked a flight and I flew out to Vietnam. And I'd never been to Vietnam in my life. And I traveled all around Vietnam and I met so many people. I told them my story. It just felt like this real, as you said before, this real defining time.
Hmm.
I wouldn't say eat, pray, love, but it almost felt like a mini version of that. I just went away to escape, and
Yeah.
being able to just be, like sit on my veranda. I booked somewhere that was like $15 for the night, and it had a beautiful veranda right on the beach. And I could just
Hmm.
step out onto the beach and hear the sea and look at the sunset, and
Hmm.
just have that time and experience the food and the people, and just explore the beauty. Thailand's beautiful. I don't know if you've been to either country, but Vietnam, the it's absolutely beautiful. It's a magical place, being able
Hmm.
to experience these wonderful times where I felt free for the first time in 4 years, where I actually walked back into my life, and
Hmm.
being able to do that all on my own felt freedom in itself, because being in that place where you feel stuck, you feel controlled. And then
Hmm.
I've always been a kind of traveler anyway. I think I was like a traveler in a former life. I was a flight attendant in my early 20s. I did that for a few years, and that was fun times because we got to travel the world for free.
Yeah.
And so it's always kind of been in my system. But I think as you say, with me now being back here, I've been back in Asia for 3 years. It's almost an about turn with what's happened. I was always meant to come back here, I think, you know.
Wow. And I like that. It almost sounds like just a serene moment of peace. And I like the reference of, eat, pray, love, because I can totally get behind that and understand it for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. So as you're healing and you're just kind of understanding yourself again and, putting things back together, when did you start sensing, wow, there's some purpose behind this?
Yeah. So when I went to see this guy and I had a couple of sessions before I went, we managed to fit like two in and then I flew off. And I
Uh-huh.
remember going into the second session, I went, I've booked it. I'm getting goosebumps. I said, I've booked it. I'm going. I was going like in 2 days. And
Yeah.
and he said, well, the first thing I'll say about you is you're adventurous. And he just and this man came highly recommended. And the minute he opened the door and I saw his face, I was like, oh, I've come to the right place. I just knew.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, you telling me that? I was like, that was really, it just felt really reinforcing, you know. And he said, I'm gonna teach you something. It looks a bit strange. And he taught me what's called EFT tapping in our first or second session. And
Hmm.
I trusted everything he said. I mean, this man has changed the lives of thousands. He's been around for many, many years now. He's 81. He still practices. This was, as I say, this was a few years ago. And he was doing this weird tapping thing on my face, and I was like, what's this? But he said, when you go away, you can use this on the plane, on the beach. It'll just help you be more centered. It'll help you feel more peace. It'll help you
Hmm.
feel, more in your own space. When you go into that place of worry, anxiety, all these, my body was almost conditioned for all these years. I think with the job, actually, because the job was very
Hmm.
toxic and stressful. And then
Hmm.
so it was all this toxicity, boom, 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 for years and years that was happening. So my body was just soaking up this, all I can say is toxic, I guess, everywhere I looked,
Hmm.
wasn't it? And so when I started to, even though I thought, well, that looks strange, but this man who looks pretty amazing is telling me about it, so there must be something in it.
Hmm.
So yeah, I started to use it. I'd be like, felt a bit embarrassed, but I'd be on the plane, kind of doing that, just tapping my hands so no one kind of saw. You could maybe do it under the table or something, and I thought, there's something in this because this is making me feel a bit more relaxed. The stress is melting away a bit more, obviously. Being on a beach and being in these beautiful places and eating beautiful food and meeting amazing people,
Hmm.
that allowed me to come into myself. So I think even just learning that technique from day one, and then when I came back, as I say, after a month, and we started having regular sessions together, and everything transformed for me. He would say I changed my own life, but he changed my life. I learned how the mind works. I learned none of this was my fault. I
Wow.
learned I wasn't broken. I learned I don't
Hmm.
need fixing. I learned this was just an old story and an old program that came from my past that was probably somebody else's story. So I started learning, I literally sucked this information up like a Hoover.
Hmm.
I was so like, wow, this is just, I was learning these skills and techniques. I was learning so much, in-depth work. And even though my first degree was in psychology, and I
Hmm.
then after that I went to do a master's in clinical psychology a few years back. But even though I'd, you know, read psychology and learnt psychology, this really gave me that in-depth understanding. And then I read all the books and I started to do all the research, and it was just life-changing. I think even now when I work with clients, and you probably really resonate, don't you? Sometimes you'll speak to a client and allow them to understand this isn't your fault. This is
Hmm.
just an old program. It's just an old story. And once they see that, it's almost like poof, like a light bulb goes off. And
Hmm.
it's so empowering, isn't it?
Hmm.
So those were huge transformations for me. And then it just became a path upward and onward.
Wow. So yeah, and you're leading right into my next question. So now you're on this path. How has your story shaped who you are today?
I think it's totally shaped who I am because even though I was in this kind of tough job,
Hmm.
you couldn't take any shit in that job. You had to,
Yeah.
learn how to manage yourself from the very start of that job. Because I worked in very deprived areas of Northern England. So I was
Hmm.
working, you can imagine, like yourself, going into these homes. And I
Hmm.
used to work with victims a lot as well. That was part of my career. But I think deep down, there were these beliefs, as I say, that were keeping me stuck. Beliefs like not feeling good enough, not feeling
Mm,
worthy,
yeah.
not feeling respected, not feeling heard, and all that played out into my relationship, my marriage. And I think learning that, understanding it and unraveling it, it allowed me to, as I say, kind of break free from those old
Hmm.
stories. And then that, you know, I think really shaped what I do now because when I started to literally like take all this information in like a sponge,
Hmm.
I thought I need to figure out some kind of a way to get out of this job because it isn't for me for life, which is what I
Right.
thought on day one, interesting enough. So yeah, so I retrained, and that led to my journey now. I retrained in NLP, EFT, otherwise known as tapping, emotional freedom technique for anyone that doesn't know, and hypnotherapy. And as I say, I went back to university, did a master's degree in clinical psychology. I got some research published in the Energy Psychology Journal. So I really delved into the research
Mm.
behind EFT tapping because I was very skeptical.
Yeah.
Even when I started training, I was still skeptical. I was like, how does this work? Like this tapping on your face, like
Uh-huh.
so yeah, that created everything to where I am now. And my business went online in 2020. And I've always had
Wow.
this dream to come back here. And I thought, you know what, I need to put that dream into action as soon as I can. So I moved out to Asia in 2022. I was in Vietnam initially, interestingly enough, and then moved over to Bangkok. We've been doing some corporate work here. So I moved to Bangkok the start of January, and I'm still here. And we've got some exciting plans going on here as well because the plan is to stay. So it's yeah, a big about turn.
Wow. Wow. And I can't wait to hear all the things that are coming. So that's awesome. Um, so Janine, let me ask you, if someone was out there listening and maybe they're in that place of rock bottom where it's like it would just be easier to go back because you're comfortable with that. You understand what it is, even though it is toxic and hard, and coming from my own place of domestic violence, it's almost like I already know what how to function in that and I can do it. So I might as well just go back. What would you tell that person?
Yeah, again, great question because when you're in first of all, it's really hard to see the wood for the trees.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like when you're in the middle of something, it is hard to see that. And over the years, I was like, you know, oh, I'd never be one of those people that got involved in a
Yeah.
relationship like that. I think we all say that, right? You obviously
Mm-hmm.
resonate. But when you're in it, especially the vulnerable position I was in when we met and everything else, and it can feel so hard to see outside of that because, as you say, it's the known. It's you don't know any different, and it just
Mm-hmm.
becomes harder and harder to leave, especially when the person is, they're
Mm-hmm.
manipulating you and they're making it all about, well, this is your fault, you've done this, you've it's this constant wearing down, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And so it can feel hard. And I really get, luckily we didn't have children. I get it can feel even harder when there's children involved, but
Mm-hmm.
because it can feel the known, I can tell if anyone's listening today, if anyone's in a similar situation, or maybe they're concerned about a friend or a family member, there is a way out after that because the best advice I can give, the whole time I was in it, I genuinely thought it was going to change.
Mm-hmm.
Things will change when we get married. Things will
Mm-hmm.
change. Things will change when. And when we did get married, we had this great, white wedding, a brilliant day. It was great because I planned it. I paid for it because I was funding everything as well financially, right? There was a lot of financial
Mm-hmm.
abuse going on. But you're constantly hearing this A level of manipulation, B, things will change. But I think when somebody is so abusive, relationships are about mutual trust, relationships are about mutual care, mutual love. When somebody is so manipulative, it's very hard. It can be very hard for that person to change. So what I
Mm-hmm.
would say is that there's always a place out of that. Like when I did finally leave, it did, as I say, take time. But once I did, even that was hard. But the thing for me was cutting all contact because once I did, even though I even found that hard, believe it or not. But once
Mm-hmm.
I did, I started to heal actually a lot quicker than I thought I would.
Mm-hmm.
And there's anyone that's listening now, honestly, there is life outside of that. If I hadn't have left and I'm still there now, I don't even want to imagine what would have happened, you know?
Yeah.
So there's always life outside. I can promise anyone listening. If anyone wants to reach out privately, they're very welcome to do so. I'm always happy to speak to anyone. If anyone would like to talk
Wonderful.
through any concerns they've got. Yeah.
Wonderful. And such good advice too, because I mean it and just coming from someone that's actually been there and has gotten out, there it's difficult to be someone that's like never experienced it because it's always you hear the just leave, and
Mm,
it's not a just leave. It's not that easy. It really isn't. Um,
yeah.
so Janine, what does a living with purpose look like for you now?
So yeah, so much purpose compared to where I was back then. I think back then I was just almost on a life treadmill, trudging along to the next day. Whereas here, I love life out in Southeast Asia. I love life out in Thailand. I think you can tell. So for
Uh-huh.
me, I've run my business, Change for Success, as I say, since 2014. For me, it's just working with phenomenal clients, and it's because of the deep work that we do, being able to see beautiful clients go from overwhelm, burnout, that they're severely stressed, they're about to walk from their marriages or their relationships or their jobs or their businesses that they've spent years building. And then for me to see these beautiful clients make huge changes, sometimes within the first session or two, to
Hmm.
go from this level of stress and not enjoying life to feeling constantly anxious, maybe that
Yeah.
anxious they can't leave the house. So to go from that to making these huge changes, sometimes I say within the space of weeks. I usually work with
Hmm.
clients between 3 to 6 months. It really does vary, but to go from there to then completely changing their life around and feeling happy, feeling present,
Hmm.
building not only relationships with themselves, but relationships with everyone around them and actually really enjoying life. And sometimes I'm sure you get this yourself. I'd love to hear, but when your client turns around to you and looks you in the eye and says, "You've changed my life." I mean,
Hmm.
I feel emotional just thinking about it. One client I saw a couple of years back, he was 60, 61, and I was talking through some stuff in a session,
Uh-huh.
and he'd been signed off work with anxiety and depression, and he said, and I looked at him, I was like, "You okay?" He was just looking at me. He said, "Yeah," and he'd been happily married for years. He said, "I've never told anyone this," and I felt just so the fact that he'd took the time to tell me that, and yeah, and as I say, the last session he looked me in the eyes, and yeah, he came off all medication, went back to work, and he said, "You've changed
Wow.
my life." So to hear
Hmm.
that, that is the purpose for me, and that's why I do this work, and I just
Hmm.
love it so much. I'm very passionate about what I do. Yeah.
I love that. I love it. So, just kind of as we wrap up our conversation, I like to ask a question of legacy and impact. Janine, if this was your last day, what would you want to be remembered for?
Oh, good question. Yeah, I think what I've said, working with people to help them make huge shifts. I think we're so fortunate in this work, aren't we, that
Hmm.
the rewards with this work, I mean, I genuinely, if you go from the stress I was in with the old job and everything else, that was trudging through life. Whereas this work, it genuinely doesn't feel like work. I love it. I love to get to work with people and help them make change in their life. And I think that's it for me, being able
Yeah.
to support someone and making a huge change and walk with them on that path and physically see them from day one. We say, right, what's your goal? It might be to be happy, it might be to make X amount of dollars, whatever it is, and to
Hmm.
walk with them to that goal. And when they get there, it's almost like, what did I say? I told you, and the look on their faces and the difference it makes to their life is just so, so rewarding.
Beautiful. Beautifully said too. I mean, I agree because it's that life fulfillment through your job. I mean, you don't even look at
Mm,
it as a job because it is tapping into your passion. And so
mm,
it just energizes you more when you get, done with your sessions with people and stuff. Whereas you receive the opposite working in the prison system. So
yeah,
wonderfully and
totally.
beautifully said. Um,
Yeah.
so my final question to you, Janine, is if you could leave maybe one bit of truth to someone listening today who's still trying to figure out their purpose in life, what would it be?
I think we've all got a purpose, and don't stress too much if you feel like you're not at that point understanding what is my purpose. Why has it not come to me yet? Because a lot of people can get really hung up in the
Mhm.
stress of not getting to that place. I think the more you relax into it and the more you kind of let go. So for me, I was able to, I mean, I was fortunate, I guess, but I was able to let go in that first month that I just took myself off to Vietnam. I traveled all around Vietnam on my own on that solo trip. But as I say, no mobile phone at all. I went to the internet cafe like once a week just to check my emails to
Uh-huh.
tell friends and family that I was, okay. And so I had that real opportunity to have that freedom and space. I think the more you relax into it and the more you just take the time to be with yourself, to be
Uh-huh.
in nature, to let go of stress or anything connected to that and just allow it to kind of come, or maybe just brain some stuff with a friend or a colleague. And but I think the key to that, don't put too much pressure on yourself. And I didn't know what I wanted to do well till I was like 35. It takes time.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So sometimes it doesn't happen overnight, right?
All right. No, and sometimes it takes going through some stuff to actually figure it out as well. So
Yeah.
Janine, you mentioned too being open to contact if someone out there is listening and they're like, you know what, I want to really learn from Janine. I want to connect with her. How can they do so?
So my website is mychangeforsuccess.com.
Hmm.
People can reach me there. I'm on LinkedIn as well, Janine Mitchell, and Janine Mitchell Success Coach Janine over on Instagram. And I've got a YouTube channel as well, Change for Success. So it's all around the Change for Success name. If you search for that, you're usually able to find me floating around the social media channels. But yeah, my website is a good place to go to initially.
Wonderful. Well, and then if you didn't catch that as you're listening, I will definitely have it posted in the description so you can always look there too, listeners. Janine, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your heart, your story, and your light with us today. It's conversations like this that remind us purpose isn't about perfection, it's about showing up and growing through the things that we go through and trusting that every step matters. Here at the Good Morning Minute and through the Empower Her Steps movement, we believe every woman has a calling worth discovering and a voice worth using. So wherever you are today, friend, remember your purpose is powerful and you're not walking alone. So until next time, keep rising, keep trusting, keep walking boldly into the life God designed for you. I'm Angelina Mojica, your life coach, sending you much love, much peace, many blessings.